Hello there, YouTube. I have a bookish tag video for you. Yeah, I know. I'm amazed I'm doing one as well. It seems that I take a step back from something, and something always drags me back in. I saw this video. I still follow BookTube. Obviously, I do. BookTube's still awesome. Yeah, it's the Literary World Cup tag. Now, I don't really follow football, but the World Cup is one of those things where it kind of transcends sports fans. Like, even if you don't follow football, you're aware of the World Cup. So, I'm aware of football, at least. I don't really follow it, but I have family members that do. And the World Cup, I didn't really care about. But I thought, okay, that sounds interesting. What's the conceit? It was an original tag by Boquins and Books. I'll link her channel in the description. And I saw Steve Donohue's video on it. And I thought, I'll have a stab at that. That sounds interesting. I'll link Steve Donohue's channel as well. I've spoken about Steve Donohue. You almost certainly know who I'm talking about. Fantastic booktuber. I think he's about as mad as it comes. But you know what? Mad people are very, very entertaining to watch. And despite the fact that he's about as mad as a hatter, he is at least a nice guy, generally speaking. So, you know, I'd rather you be mad and nice than sane and an arsehole. So, there's that. But yeah, Steve Donohue, definitely well worth watching. His video was very entertaining. And he tried to make this a little bit more interesting. The original idea was create a team of 11 authors to represent the literature of your country. If your football knowledge allows it, associate each author with a position on the pitch and explain why. For an author to be on your team, you have to have read at least one of their books. Okay, so that is the conceit. So I have to have read at least one of their books. That's not going to be difficult given who I have on my team. I have a good list, I think, here, and it should be entertaining to go through why, because I tried to come up with reasons why they should be in their positions. It's weird. This is football. That they're authors, but follow along my logic, you'll see what I get to. Before we get onto that, I want to discuss the World Cup in itself, because there was a very interesting point that Steve Donohue brought up, and it's one that I don't think we should be ignoring, and that is the World Cup as an institution. As some people may be aware, if you follow football, if you don't follow it, you might not. The World Cup Committee decides who hosts the World Cup, and it's decided by a very small council of officials that are self-appointed within FIFA, and they separate out depending on the region. So Europe and parts of Asia are UEFA, and the other areas are different groups, and then they all come together to form FIFA. And they all send representatives to vote on which country hosts. And the thing is, this organisation is extremely corrupt. Disgustingly corrupt. They took millions of dollars in bribes from various different oligarchs in order to boost certain countries. So the 2018 World Cup ended up going to Russia. And the reason it went to Russia is because at least 2 officials on the FIFA committee got bribes in excess of $1 million each. Which is not great. It could have gone to other countries. There were plenty of other countries that were bidding for it, including England, which was the favourite to win. By far had the infrastructure for it, a much better choice, but it ended up going to Russia. Next, it was likely to end up going to America for 2022. That was the favourite. America doesn't have a big football culture. They have a big hand egg culture, which is a nickname I affectionately give to American football, because I have this weird thing where I expect a sport called football to be about kicking a ball with your foot, not throwing a leather egg with your hand. You know, so it's hand egg. That's what that sport is. But anyway, they don't have a big football culture, so it makes sense that it didn't really go there, but there were other people who were, there were other countries that were going for it. Japan was putting in a bid. Australia was putting in a bid. But it ended up going to Qatar. Now, if you're not familiar, Qatar is one of the Gulf states in the Middle East. It is, well, to not put too fine a point on it, a horrible fascist hellhole. It is a Muslim country. It is a theocracy. Apostasy is punishable by severe penalties that can include death. This is the kind of place where atheists will be thrown off building roofs, things like that. Homosexuality is punishable by death. Like, you could be hanged for being gay. Women have very little in the way of rights. They don't have proper democracy. Qatar is not a pleasant place to be. It is a rich place because of oil tycoons. And you can get away with visiting it as a holiday destination if you stick to certain resorts, because that's what a lot of those countries are like. So Qatar it's similar to a lot of places in the area. It has the same kind of culture as Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, things like that. It's all based around the oil tycoons and how they built up, and they're all modernising in a way. Qatar is one of those countries. The thing is, this has pissed a lot of people off, because in order for them to be considered for the World Cup, they need to prove that they don't have quite so bad a human rights violation, and they clearly lied to the committee, bribed the committee, and the committee looked the other way. This is not right, and it should not have stood. However, I'm going to disagree with Steve Donoghue on this, in that he believes that Qatar should not have been chosen, and that it's a terrible travesty, and that people should even consider boycotting the World Cup. I am actually going to go the other way. I think this is a good thing that Qatar ended up winning. Not because of the corruption, but because I think what this will do is it will force Qatar to modernise. What we've now done is taken a huge international sport that has been bouncing backwards and forwards from Europe to South America over and over and over again, because those are the places that play it, and it's now finally going to other places. It's going to North America, it's going to East Asia, it's going to the Middle East, it's going to places like South Africa. It's getting more worldwide appeal, and this is good. By sending the World Cup to a place like Qatar, we are going to force Qatar to accept international visitors on a grander scale than they ever have before. They're going to have to accept that they are going to have fans from around the world. They are going to need to be okay with having gay people in their country and atheists in their country. They're going to need to get over this shit, and they're going to need to become more moderate and more reasonable. Now, I'm not expecting their culture to change overnight. That's not going to happen. But I do think that by forcing them to modernise in this way, we're taking what was a petro-state and turning it into an entertaining state. And that's how this is becoming, because they're putting millions and millions of dollars into this. They are building a whole array of 20 brand new modern air-conditioned stadiums where they're going to host international sports. I could see Qatar turning this into a new cottage industry for the whole country. It's a tiny country. I believe Qatar is going to turn this into a new cottage industry, that it's going to replace at least some of the oil trade for them. As soon as they start hosting more and more international sports, they're going to want to have more countries involved, and they're going to spend more time trying to schmooze up to Europe and North America, because they're going to want those countries to be involved. They can't turn this into an industry without us. So for this to be profitable for them, they need us, and they need us to be okay with them. For us to be okay with them, we need to put down guidelines. We need to say, okay, we'll accept that this is how you are now, but we want you to move this way. You're going to host these events. You need to be okay with us being here without you kicking up a stink because we say a thing you don't like, or we bring someone you don't like, or because I'm holding hands with my boyfriend in the corner over there. No, not going to happen. Right? You have to change, and you have to change now. That's what we need to do. And I think what we're effectively doing by letting the World Cup stay in Qatar is lighting that fire under the arse of Qatar. We're making the country modernise very quickly. I think this will be a move towards a liberalising shift. And that's a good thing. It's not going to be obvious from the outside. We're not going to see the change because we're going to look at it and we're going to say, these things are still illegal, these things are still banned. But I guarantee from within, you'll see a softening. You'll see the laws soften a little. Where perhaps laws on homosexuality may soften enough where it'll still probably be illegal. But it'll be illegal but won't carry the death penalty. Or it'll be illegal to be in public, but you won't get arrested for just living as a gay person, that kind of thing. There's steps that have to be taken. And whilst we want for the country to immediately make these jumps from being a fascist hellhole to being a nice place immediately, they can't make that jump. It's too big of a leap. We need them to increment. And I think by making it so that they have to engage with the international community, they'll start doing those steps and they'll start doing them quicker. So I think it's a good thing. I'm optimistic that there's some good that can come from this. That said, I don't watch the World Cup from a stadium. I don't travel to these countries for this. If I was a gay footballer, or if I was a gay football fan who was travelling, I would be very angry. If I was an outspoken atheist, or hell, even an outspoken Christian who didn't want to be in a Muslim theocracy who was going to treat anyone who's not Islamic as the enemy, I would be very angry. I can see why people are angry. This is not a nice place in the world. But we can't just expect these places to change overnight. It's too much to ask for these kinds of changes to happen on a geopolitical stage. But I think we're pushing for it. I think we are forcing them to lean that way. Anyway, that was my political addendum to this, and I hope that it's given a different perspective. I completely agree with Steve that it is a shame that it went to them, and it shouldn't have happened. But that's enough of that. On to the book tag, because that's what we're all here for, aren't we? So, the World Cup, the Literary World Cup tag. The idea is we pick 11 authors. I have to have read at least one book by each author, and we place them in a position in the football field to play a game of football. And the argument is this is not a real game of football. We're not actually putting the author there, which is good, because at least some of mine are dead, which a corpse can't play football. But it's supposed to represent an abstract idea of football. So the way I've interpreted this is I've put the goalie as the defender of the literature. This is the last step. This is the last barrier. You need to get past this to score against us. So the goalie should be the very, very base line of what literature is to us. And it should be something that can appeal to anyone and everyone on some level, where there's a little bit of something there that can always be thrown back and we can go, there we go, we've got you interested again. Right. So that's how I'm seeing the goalie. The defenders, I've picked authors who can inspire young readers. I want people who are not necessarily going to be readers off the bat to see these authors pick up a book maybe for the first time, or pick up a book when they're not generally one for reading, and this might spur them on. So the defenders are defending against the literary apathy. That's how I'm seeing this. The defenders are defending against the onslaught that is the lack of literature. So the defenders push you back and push you back into the literary world of British literature. That's my idea. The midfielders then, these are staples of literature. Not necessarily the biggest examples, but staples of literature. These are designed to keep you going. They do the hard work. They are the literary, not necessarily literary giants, but the literary figures that will keep you coming back for more. They are the snack food of literature, but they're not hollow, they're not empty. They're not just empty calories, there's some substance to them as well, but they're easy to take in and you want to see more of them. So they've got a wide amount of literature to their name, they've got a good selection, and they can keep pumping out just a little bit of difference that can keep you coming back and keep you pushing forwards. Then at the far end I've got my strikers. The strikers are the ones that they don't need to make much. They need to produce one good work. And that good work needs to be enough to propel the ball forwards, because they need to score the goal. So that's how I'm seeing it. Hopefully that all makes sense. It's an abstract concept, I know. So, I have as my defenders, I have a weird formation, by the way. I've decided on a formation based on the formation that I enjoy watching and that I think is interesting. And it's a very, very weird formation in football. It's not one that you see very often, and that is a 3-1-3-1-2. You know, I know, it's a bizarre formation. Most have like a 4-4-2 or a 4-3-3. I go 3-1-3-1-2. Right. Now, this gives you a strong backbone, and it gives you players on the wing that can kick backwards and forwards to the centre. You play a strong centre line, and you have a lot of players that can kick backwards and forwards along that centre line and out to the wings and then back in. So the ball is constantly moving backwards and forwards across the pitch, and there's a lot of players on that middle line who can dart out towards the direction where the ball is. So you have that middle line. If the ball's going left or right, if there's a goal here and a goal here, the ball is on one wing, you can move your middle line to cover that wing. It does give you a weakness on the side you're not on, but I think it makes for a very interesting game. That's the formation I'm going for anyway. So I have 3 defenders, then a defensive midfielder, then 3 midfielders, then a centre forward, and then 2 strikers. That's how I have it. So I have, for my left defender, centre defender, and right defender, I have 3 authors that I feel bring children and younger readers into reading. They represent British writers that have grabbed people and brought them forwards, and I wanted this to be a way for me to discuss some lesser known authors. So I've not put really, really high profile authors on here. So for left defender, I've got Roald Dahl. Roald Dahl is a great children's author. Wrote books that you're probably familiar with, like The Witches, James and the Giant Peach, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Some really good options there. Matilda, again, great film made out of that. There's loads of really, really good children's books there that will bring people up. If you started reading Roald Dahl like I did as a child, I guarantee you'll develop a love for reading. So Roald Dahl is in there. For my centre defender, I have Lewis Carroll. There is very little that I can think of that would be more quintessential as a British staple than Alice in Wonderland. Like, it is one of those childhood tales that keeps getting retold and retold. It may not be much of a library from Lewis Carroll, but it's enough. So Lewis Carroll is my centre defender. Right defender, I have one that's a bit contentious. This one people might argue doesn't count, because I'm doing this from a British perspective. I'll point out I'm including English and Scottish writers, because this is the United Kingdom, and Scottish independence didn't pass. You're not a separate country. You are part of the same country. We are a country of countries. So, Scottish writers count. But this one might be a bit of a push. You could argue this is an Indian writer, but this was when India was part of the British Empire, and he considered himself largely British. So I have Rudyard Kipling. Now, Rudyard Kipling is a great staple of old children's literature. The Jungle Book is a good example of a classic of children's literature that you can always rely on. That said, if you consider Rudyard Kipling to not count, I do have an alternate, and that is J.M. Barrie. J.M. Barrie wrote the Peter Pan books. Again, I think both of these would take this position well. They're a great introduction to reading for children, and I think all of these defenders will bring you to a point where you're going to want to keep reading. That's what the defenders are for me. These are children's authors. These are authors that instill the love of reading. They are the defenders of literature. Without instilling that love for reading in young readers, most people who read today wouldn't be reading. Most people who read as children. So if you don't learn to love books as a child, you probably won't ever learn to love books. Most of my friends that don't read on the regular don't read because they never learned to read for pleasure as children. So that's why these are the defenders. We need this. So my defensive midfielder in that regard is J.K. Rowling. Why? Because you need the midfield to be powerful. And there's nothing more powerful than the woman who got more British kids to read than anyone else in the world. That is what she did. Whether you enjoy Harry Potter or not, that's what she did. So, J.K. Rowling is on that list. Now, this is a bit of a cheat because I still haven't actually read any of the Harry Potter books all the way through, though I have read some of the first Harry Potter book. I am currently reading it. So I'm counting that because I am currently reading it. I have also got some of the Robert Galbraith books, though, which are also J.K. Rowling, because that's J.K. Rowling's pen name for other books. And I think those also have some merit in this discussion as well, because that's another staple genre, the kind of cozy thriller book that appeals to the everyday person. Those are exactly what the Robert Galbraith books are. And I think J.K. Rowling is, whilst they're never going to be as big, J.K. Rowling is still tapping into a needed group there, a needed zeitgeist. So, that's my first four. Now I've got my left midfield, my centre midfield, and my right midfield. And here I've got a few staples that will keep you coming back. I wanted short books. I wanted books that you can read without too much hassle, without too much of a challenge. So for the left midfield, I have H.G. Wells, and for the right midfield, I have Robert Louis Stevenson. We have some great examples of sci-fi and adventure right here. These will keep you coming back. They're nice and easy, pick up and read style books. Exactly what you want in order to push people into literature. So, what do I have as my centre midfield? For that, I've got Agatha Christie. Because Agatha Christie is the name behind the mystery novel. So I think that there's always something there that can draw people in. Mystery novels they're the genre that can drag in non-readers and give them that impetus to keep reading. So Agatha Christie is a great choice for this. But whilst we've got a lot of stuff here that's dragging people in and bringing people to literature, we're going to need something that people can genuinely fall in love with. Now, that's not to say that you can't fall in love with Agatha Christie or H.G. Wells or Roald Dahl or anything else like that. You definitely can. But I think we need a giant of literature. And that's what the centre forward is. The centre forward plays halfway between midfield and the striker position. They are the kingmaker. They are close enough that they can start scoring goals, and they're far enough back that they can start to really harass the defence of the other team. They're a great position. They are the moneymaker position. And there is no one in English literature who needs to be in this position more than Jane Austen. Whilst it may not be for everyone, romance is not a genre that many people enjoy when they're talking on BookTube. It's kind of the black sheep genre, and the vast majority of Jane Austen's work are classic romances. Still, Jane Austen is spoke about very, very fondly. Everyone will admit that Jane Austen's works are groundbreaking, that they are they are a literary bedrock, and that's why Jane Austen needs to be here. If you're at the point where you are reading Jane Austen and you are developing a love for literature, Jane Austen will keep you wanting to read for the rest of your life. So that's what Jane Austen is there for. So what about our strikers? The strikers need to be the kind that push you forwards and give you a deep-seated love for a single work. It needs to be one thing where it just hits home and it makes you go, smack, yes, I get that. And I've got two very different books here. And it is specific books, but two books by two very standout British authors. I have George Orwell's 1984. Orwellian fiction is a genre all of its own at this point. People who don't read talk about George Orwell's 1984. It's a book that stays with you even if you're not a reader. So George Orwell stands as a striker. If you are looking for something that will really push forwards and make British literature stand out, George Orwell does that. The other striker, I have to give my props to The Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien. Whilst I'm not a huge Lord of the Rings fan, I cannot possibly talk about literature and not admit that The Lord of the Rings is the foundation for a vast majority of my reading. I read a lot of fantasy novels, and so much of that is based off Lord of the Rings. I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. Huge amounts of that are influenced by Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is an immediate goal for British literature. So J.R.R. Tolkien is in the striker position. That leaves us with the goalie. Now the goalie has a role to play. And that role is that if all else fails, they are the last line of defence. They are the literary figure that will stop you from becoming apathetical, that will give you the impetus to go back. And for that, I can think of no one better, no one who could stop British literature from falling into irrelevancy than Charles Dickens. Dickensian novels are still loved to this day for a reason. But it doesn't have to be the big, thick ones. It doesn't have to be the big ones that everyone looks at and rolls their eyes and thinks that's going to take forever. It can be something small. It can be something easy. It can be something like Oliver Twist, which is my personal favourite, or hell, even as simple as a novella that is A Christmas Carol. It's barely a novel. It's practically a novella. A Christmas Carol is exactly the kind of book that if you need to push someone into reading, you give them that and they will still love it. I don't know a single person who has read Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol and didn't love it, because it's wholesome in every possible way. But that does leave me with a few things, and that is, what do I do for substitutions? Well, I have a few ideas. For midfield, I have a substitution, and that is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle works really, really well as a substitution. He can come on in place of Agatha Christie. He could come on in place of Robert Louis Stevenson. That definitely works. I also have Ian Fleming. Ian Fleming could definitely come on in place of Robert Louis Stevenson or H.G. Wells. The 007 Bond books, definitely a very British institution there. So those are my first two subs. I have 4 people on my subs bench. For my substitute striker, there's no one really who can replace Tolkien, but if George Orwell is not to your taste, Aldous Huxley is just as hard-hitting, perhaps not as famous, but just as hard-hitting, and a great substitution for George Orwell. And as my defender, I have to go with Enid Blyton. Perhaps not as well known as Roald Dahl, Lewis Carroll or Rudyard Kipling, or even J.M. Barrie, who you could argue is also on my subs bench, depending on whether or not you're accepting Rudyard Kipling as an acceptable choice. Enid Blyton was the author I read the most as a child. She wrote children's short stories and children's novellas and the Famous Five series of children's novels. I loved them as a kid, and I could even see her taking on the midfield role, as the Famous Five and Secret Seven novels are basically children's equivalent of what Agatha Christie was doing. They are mystery novels. So there's a lot there that can make Enid Blyton work in this conceit, I suppose. So that's how I've taken on this tag. It's very abstract. It's very difficult to know whether or not I've done this right, but I hope that that's been entertaining. I think it's been fun, and I had a lot of fun trying to put this list together. I think that this is a really exciting, really interesting tag. So I look forward to seeing other people doing this tag. I am going to tag a few people. I'm going to tag Bald Book Geek. I know you tagged me in a video a few weeks back, actually. I've had a really, really rough couple of months. I've not got around to doing it. I will do that tag at some point. Now, I don't know if you're a fan of football. It doesn't strike me as something you're overly interested in, but I'm not a particular fan of it either. You never know, you might have an interesting take on this tag. So, I'm going to tag the Bald Book Geek. I'm going to tag Billy Bonsai, because I think you'll have an interesting take on this as well. And I also want to say, both those people are going to be doing it with nations that we're likely going to see already. So if you are from a country that is not USA or the UK, which we're going to see a lot of, because that's the vast majority of BookTube, consider yourself tagged, because I want to see other literature exposed to this tag. I want to see like a French person do this with French literature. I want to see a German person do it with German literature, a Dutch person do it with Dutch literature. I want to see something really outlandish that I have no knowledge of at all, like an Argentinian person do it with Argentinian literature. I don't know a single Argentinian author. Like, that would be fascinating to see. So, if you are a non-Anglosphere, so not British, not American, I suppose if you're Canadian, you can count yourself as not part of that, then go ahead, because I don't really know literature outside of British and American literature, with the exception of a bit of French and a bit of Russian literature. That's about all I really know. So those four countries are the only ones I have any real exposure to, and I'd like to know more about other countries' literature. It's an interesting topic, and this is a good excuse to learn more. So consider yourself tagged if you are from any other country, and if you are British or American, but you want to try this with a different country, like if you're British but you read a lot of Russian literature, let's do this with Russia. If you're American but you read a lot of French literature, do it with French literature, and let's see what you come up with. Hell, if you read a lot of Japanese literature, and I know there's a lot of people who read a lot of Japanese literature, it's starting to pop up more and more now. That would be really interesting to see. I don't know if there's enough people who do it, and I suppose you could always include manga in there as well if you wanted to. But that would be a fascinating list to see. So let's see what we come up with, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.